Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson. We're continuing our study of the wives of David, and we began our 2 day conversation about Abigail yesterday and how she became David's wife, and how David, in the one time in his for the only time in his life, at least as recorded in the text of Scripture, shows true appreciation, respect, honor to a woman in his life, and he does to Abigail. And we also saw Abigail, unlike any of the other wives, truly exercise agency. I mean, she's the one who took this perilous situation in hand and not only averted the bloodbath that was about to happen, but linked her current husband with David's enemies, marked out for death by God, and told David when the Lord had blessed him and put him in his position as king to not forget her, to remember her. And so she basically, you know, rids herself of one husband and then claims the other one. And what she describes in this speech to David happens, and it happens almost immediately when Nabal finds out that what had happened. He has a heart attack or a stroke or something. It takes him a few days to die, but he dies, and then she makes sure David gets word that she's on the market and available, and uh, and he sends to immediately for her, and she comes with her 5 maids and becomes his wife. He also has already taken another wife, Ahinoam of Jezreel. She's the fourth wife that we know a little bit about, and we'll talk about her some today. I've always wondered what happened to the 5 maids. Did any of these other mighty men have women with them while they were fleeing Saul? I don't know. Um, Yeah, back in the Napoleonic era, the British Navy, a captain could have his wife with him on board. Nobody else could, but he could. Um, some of them did take their wives with them. I don't know. I don't know. But again, we have these women, these 5 maids, who really don't have agency, and now they're with this band of guerrilla fighters in the southwestern frontier of Judah. Um, So David at, flees to Gath. I don't know how intelligent that was to flee to Gath. Who's from Gath, by the way? We've just been reminded somebody from Gath in Abigail's talk when she talks about God using a sling to protect David. Goliath is from Gath, and David has killed Goliath. David wields Goliath's sword, and yet he goes back to Gath, and 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 when he goes to Gath, Saul doesn't pursue him anymore, thinking, well, there you go. He's not going to survive there, but he does. And he lives at Gath with his men, each with his household, even David with his 2 wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, Abigail, the Carmelitess, Nabal's widow. Um, so evidently his men, some of them do have households there in Gath. So while he's in Gath, he's made some raids on the Amalekites. And while he's away, um, from Gath, the Amalekites seek revenge on David, and they raid Ziklag, where David has been staying, and they take David's wives. In 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 1, it happened when David and his men came to Ziklag on the 3rd day, the Amalekites made a raid on the Negev and on Ziklag, and had overthrown Ziklag and burned it with fire. And they took captive the women and all who were in it, both small and great, without killing them anyone, and carried them off and went their way. And when David and his men came back to the city, behold, it was burnt with fire, and their wives, their sons, their daughters had been taken captive. Not only him, but his mighty men. Um, then David and the people who were with him lifted their voices and wept until there was no strength in them to weep. And David's two wives have been taken captive: Ahinoam the Jezreelitess and Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmelite. Abigail is always called in Scripture the widow of Nabal, the Carmelitess. It's a reminder. David has her, and she was another man's wife. I don't know why the text does that, but she is always, except for one instance, First Chronicles 3:1, she's always called the widow of Nabal. Um, so David strengthens himself, he gets his forces together. They pursue the Amalekites. The Amalekites were kind of like the Vikings of Palestine. They had villages, they had a little bit of agriculture, but mostly they raided other people and took their agricultural product. And so they've carried these women away, and women are resources. We haven't said that before. Father with daughters had resources because you get a bride price for the daughter. You could sell women as slaves, as concubines. Women are a monetary resource, and so they're taken alive. One wonders how they were treated in the time before they were between the time they were taken and the time that David rescues them, because First Samuel 30 makes clear that David does rescue everybody alive, all their wives, all their children, and also takes a lot of spoil from the Amalekites. And being the generous fellow that he is, sends a bunch of that spoil back to the elders of Judah, to help support his own people and also to stay in good with the elders of Judah. Um, but anyway, um, one wonders what um, uh, violence or atrocities they may have been exposed to between the time they were taken and the time David um, rescues them. All I know is that David doesn't treat his wives the way he treats his concubines after he finds out that his son had slept with them. Um, so whatever happened, it did not end the husband-wife relationship between David and Ahinoam and Abigail. We only have Abigail mentioned one other time, and that's in 2 Samuel chapter 3, when she is listed as the mother of David's second born son. Um, and that's all we know of Abigail. I mean, that's it. That's what we have. We get to know her so well and see her so fully realized on the page. And then she has what we think of, if that was the end of the story, the Jane Austen fairy tale ending, you know, the woman ends up with the man she ought to be with. Um, and then immediately find out he's got another wife. And then we find out that not long after that, they get kidnapped by the Vikings of Palestine and have to be rescued by David. So, is her life better with David than it was with Nabal and Carmel? I don't know how to answer that. But she is David's wife, and she gives birth in Hebron to a son of David's when David is king, his second-born son. Okay, next time we'll talk about Bathsheba. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes.